Yeah, that's my motivation, is based basically on curiosity. I mean, I'm fascinated that we've gotten this far. I mean, given that the most economical situation would be pure nothingness, what is this? I mean, why is nature doing these things? And why is organization have such a tenacity? And what does it mean that we appear so late in the process and represent such a difference in the rest of nature? It's very mysterious. We get used to reality because it's so stable, but in fact it's an absolutely confounding situation. Besides the DMT flash, the only other thing that I know that's as confounding as that is ordinary consciousness and incarnate being in a body. It's just so improbable, you know. Yeah, well, I was very resonant with the person over here who mentioned Evelyn Underhill's book on mysticism, because I also read it at about that age. And I wanted these mystical experiences. The problem is that the thing that is so powerful about the psychedelics is that they perform on demand, which almost in principle you cannot expect of a mystical experience, because that would be essentially man ordering God at man's whim, which is not how it's supposed to work. Similarly, you know, waiting for UFOs to come by, you spend a lot of cold nights in the cornfield, but if you were to take 5 dried grams of Stropharia cubensis and spend the night in the cornfield, I don't know whether you would get UFOs, but I guarantee you by morning your notebook would be full of something. So the fascinating thing about the psychedelic is, of all of the, it seems magical in the sense that it seems to respond to human will. One decides whether this is the evening or not. And sometimes people have said to me, well, don't you want to achieve these things on the natch? Well, to me that suggests a certain degree of out-of-controlness. In other words, if I were sitting here suddenly to notice that I appeared to have taken 20 milligrams of psilocybin, I would be alarmed. I would be concerned. I would want to know the casuistry of why I felt this way, whether somebody had dosed me at dinner or I was losing my mind or what was going on. On the other hand, if I had initiated the experience, I would be perfectly at ease with it and see the unfolding signposts and know what it was. Yeah, it's a difference of sort of waiting in an attitude of the supplicant, the expectant supplicant, or being the Hierophant with all the Faustian echoes that carries with it, and being able to call down the power or go up to the power at will. And, you know, that's a fantastic thing and a responsibility. Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that inevitably downloads out of all this psychedelic stuff is, because it's central to understanding our nature anyway, is how do we relate to our sexuality, to our relationships, to our obligations to biology and romanticism and so forth and so on. And you mentioned monotony, monogamy, and monotheism, or was that the one? Yeah, well, part of what happens with a career like mine is everything you ever say is taped. So then your ideas may change over time, but people will listen to an 8-year-old tape, a 6-year-old tape, and so you're like imprisoned or liberated, I haven't figured out which, because you must account for every opinion you ever held, even if you no longer hold it. The toughest thing to figure out is relationships. It is the yoga of the West, but it's harder than yoga. I'm 52 nearly, and I don't feel greatly wiser in this area than I felt at 24. And, I've had a marriage, I've had a divorce, I've been single, I've had long-term relationships, short-term relationships, on and on and on. This is part of what I'll say in a larger context is we shouldn't seek for closure. We shouldn't, part of what the psychedelic point of view represents is living a certain portion of your life without answers. Just accepting that certain dilemmas will never resolve themselves into some kind of a complete answer. That's why psychedelics are so different from any system being sold, from one of the great elder systems like Christianity to the latest cult out of Los Angeles. These cults, these cultic answers, always invariably provide a complete set of answers to life's dilemmas at the price of being absurd, but this doesn't seem to bother people. So part of what being psychedelic means, I think, is relentlessly living with unanswered questions. And this relationship thing, this is the heart of the alchemical furnace. This is where the coincidentia positorum is a fact in your life and my life. And I don't know whether psychedelics make it easier or harder to come to terms with that. They certainly reveal its many facets with incredible and sometimes bewildering clarity. Yeah. It's a frustrating situation because the literature tells you that DMT occurs widely throughout nature, distributed through grasses, mammalian brain tissue, leguminous trees, rubiaceous plants. But when you actually go to try and get it out, you encounter two problems. Either it's spread very thin, if it's spread thin by simply gross overwhelmment, you can get it out. But the other problem is it often occurs complexed with other tryptamines of very nearly the same molecular weight, and they have activity you don't want, cardioactive activity or like that. So practically speaking, in my own experience, the cleanest source of DMT is Psychotria viridis. And if you can get hold of it and grow it, you will obtain a clean source of DMT. But you need 5 acres in a tropical country to do it right. That's why I have 5 acres in a tropical country. What? Well, it is Schedule 1. Pardon me? Yeah, all DMT is Schedule 1, but there's a weird catch-22 around that. I mean, we all contain DMT. So, it's like the universal holding law. Everybody's holding. Everybody is potentially out from under the umbrella. Probably, though you may not wish to hear this, the shortcut, the easier path, is to just tighten your belt and learn organic chemistry and make it then from scratch, or from tryptophan or indole or something. But it's a puzzle why there is so little DMT, because as a synthetic process it's not that difficult. It's certainly far less difficult than making LSD or something like that. But it's vanishingly rare in the underground. One reason for that may be, if you sell somebody a gram, they may leave a significant portion of it to their great-grandchildren. This is not a drug of abuse, where what people like are drugs where you sell somebody a gram at 8 in the evening and at 11 o'clock they're beating on your door to buy 2 more. This is not like that. It is... You mean, what is it doing there? It's not really well understood. The people who identified it, their best guess was that it had something to do with very rapid shifts of short-term attention. In other words, a shot is fired, everyone in the room turns and looks in well under a second. That is possibly those shifts of attention are mediated by DMT. The fact that it is so dramatic as a psychedelic experience but goes away so quickly makes it an ideal chemical to use in these kinds of short-term reactions where something spikes and then very rapidly returns to its baseline. But what it's really doing in human metabolism, we don't know. DMT, like many psychedelics, competes with serotonin for the serotonergic bond site. Interesting then that drugs like Prozac and Zoloft, these new antidepressants, they also relate to, though in a different way, the serotonergic system, one of the 4 major neurotransmitter systems that operates in the human brain. It's no surprise to me that these extremely effective antidepressants are emerging out of meddling with serotonergic chemistry. DMT, many people experience it as orgasmic or ecstatic. Ecstasy is not simply joy. Ecstasy is an emotion of very great complexity that hovers almost on the edge of terror sometimes. But we could speculate that the orgasm is an interesting phenomenon, and what is the chemical basis of orgasm, and why does it occur at all? Since in many animals it doesn't occur. And in fact, as you advance in the animal phylogeny, orgasm becomes more common. Well, I would bet that the chemistry of orgasm, the chemistry of DMT, the chemistry of mood alteration, in the next 5 or 10 years, this will all be pieced, deconstructed and understood. I mean, the recent flap of Viagra will be as nothing when a drug is discovered which causes orgasm. And chemically, this is probably not far out of reach. Orgasm is a pretty general spectrum chemical response that you ought to be able to pharmacologically mimic with reasonable facility. I'm sure some of our best people at our pharmaceutical companies are hard at work on this. Yeah, but I digress.
Before we get to prayer, would you talk a little bit about Mimosa hostilis?
Oh, as a source of DMT? If you can get it. I mean, Mimosa hostilis is at least as exotic as Psychotria viridis. Seeds are sold by some of these seedsmen. That sounds fine. I'm not commenting on the price, I'm commenting on the pharmacology. If you take 2 grams of Pegamen harmala seeds well ground and a sufficient amount of the root scrapings of Mimosa hostilis, which is the Brazilian species, and then the conspecific Mexican species is Mimosa teniflora. As far as we can tell, chemically these things are equivalent. That works. Basically, if you're serious about pursuing this, you need to get into the habit of growing things and gardening, or you need to sharpen up your chemistry chops and actually become a synthetic chemist.
Well, you